He told her to take a taxi because he was stuck in a meeting. But she was already at the airport, standing there, just 20 meters behind him. She flew home one day early, just to surprise him. For 14 nights, he called her every night, said, "I miss you," said, "I can't wait to see you." So she called him, and he said it again, "Baby, just grab a taxi." And that's when something felt wrong. Not loud, not obvious, just wrong. So she turned around, slowly, and saw him. Not busy, not rushing, smiling, walking straight toward another woman. He hugged her. Not a quick hug, not polite, a long one, the kind that says, "I've been waiting for you." And suddenly, every single call, every "I miss you," every "baby" made sense. He wasn't lying sometimes. He was living a completely different life. And the worst part? He said all of that to her while standing in the same building, while she was right there, watching everything. And in that moment, she didn't feel heartbroken. She felt something worse. She realized this wasn't a mistake. This was who he really was. He told his wife to take a taxi, while he was already at the airport, picking up another woman. The airport hummed with recycled air, rolling suitcases, and low announcements echoing through cold white light. Amara Johnson stood still beside the baggage carousel, her fingers resting lightly on the handle of her burgundy suitcase, her posture composed but alert in the way of someone who notices everything. She was a tall black woman in her early 30s, her deep brown skin glowing under the fluorescent lights, her tightly coiled hair pulled back into a clean, low bun that revealed sharp cheekbones and steady, observant eyes. Amara had always been the kind of woman who didn't need noise to feel powerful. She preferred clarity, control, quiet certainty. She had flown back one day early, not because she had to, because she wanted to surprise him. For 14 nights, her husband had called her, "Miss you, can't wait to see you. Home doesn't feel the same without you." And she had believed him, every single word. Amara adjusted the coat draped over her arm, her mind replaying his voice in soft echoes, each promise carefully stored like something real. Love, to her, had always meant showing up fully, even when no one was watching. It was something she had learned the hard way. Growing up, stability wasn't given. It was built, maintained, protected. Then she met Marcus. Marcus Johnson was the kind of man people trusted before they understood why. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a sharp jaw softened by a perfectly trimmed beard, he carried himself with an ease that made others feel comfortable around him. His dark skin and calm voice gave him a quiet authority, and he had spent most of his life learning how to read a room, how to say the right thing at the right time. It made him successful. It made him charming. It also made him difficult to read when it mattered most. But Amara hadn't questioned him, not when he showed up, not when he called every night, not when he said, "I miss you." She reached for her phone and called him. It rang twice. "Baby," Marcus answered, his voice warm, slightly rushed, perfectly familiar. "I'm so sorry. I'm stuck in a meeting. It ran over. Just grab a taxi, okay? I'll make it up to you tonight." Amara didn't speak right away. There it was again. Nothing obvious, nothing she could prove, but something off. "Okay," she said quietly. She hung up. Around her, people reunited, laughed, hugged, but for a moment, everything slowed down. something wasn't right, and this time, she didn't ignore it. She turned, slowly, and that was when she saw him. Marcus. Not at the office, not in any meeting. Here, walking through the arrivals hall like he had nowhere else to be. His shoulders were relaxed, his expression open in a way she hadn't seen in weeks, unguarded, almost happy. Amara didn't move. Her grip tightened slightly around her suitcase as she watched him step closer to the arrivals gate. And then the doors opened. A woman walked through. Chloe. Amara didn't know her name yet, but she would never forget her face. Chloe was in her late 20s, light brown skin, long straightened hair falling smoothly past her shoulders, dressed in clean, fitted layers that made her look effortless and intentional at the same time. There was a brightness in her eyes, a kind of expectation that hadn't been broken yet. When Chloe saw Marcus, she smiled, and Marcus smiled back. Not polite, not careful, real. He walked straight toward her and pulled her into a hug. Not quick, not distant. A long, familiar embrace. The kind of hug that says, "I've been waiting for you." And suddenly, everything made sense. Every late-night call, every "I miss you," every soft "baby" he had whispered through the phone. Amara felt it then. Not heartbreak, something colder, clearer. She remembered every single night he said he missed her, while standing right here with someone else. Marcus took Chloe's suitcase from her hand. He leaned closer, said something that made her laugh, a natural laugh, the kind you don't fake. Chloe touched his arm as they walked, their rhythm already familiar, already practiced. Amara stood there, 20 meters away, invisible, watching her husband live a life she had never been invited into. He opened the car door for Chloe, placed her luggage in the trunk, and drove away. Just like that. Amara didn't run after him, didn't call his name, didn't cry. Because in that moment, she didn't need emotion. She needed understanding. And she had just seen enough. She turned toward the taxi line, her steps calm, controlled, her mind already moving faster than her heart. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't confusion. This was a second life, and she had just walked into it by accident. But what Marcus didn't know, what he couldn't possibly see yet, was that the woman he thought he could replace so easily was the one holding his entire life together. And the moment she decided to stop, everything he depended on was about to fall apart. He said, "I miss you," while holding another woman in his arms. Amara didn't move. For a second, her body forgot how to react, as if her instincts had been disconnected from her emotions. The airport noise blurred into something distant, like a sound underwater. People passed by her, laughing, reuniting, living their ordinary moments. But her world had already shifted into something colder, sharper, irreversible. She watched Marcus carefully, not like a wife, like a stranger studying a man she thought she knew. Marcus leaned in slightly as he spoke to the woman, his tone softer, his posture relaxed in a way Amara hadn't seen in months. The tension he used to carry around her, the subtle defensiveness, the small distractions, was gone. With this woman, he looked effortless. That was the first truth that cut deeper than the lie. The second came quickly after. The woman laughed again, tilting her head just slightly, brushing her fingers along Marcus's sleeve as if it belonged there. Her name, though Amara didn't know it yet, was Chloe. She carried herself with a light confidence, the kind that hadn't yet been challenged by reality. Her skin was smooth, her movements unguarded, her eyes bright with expectation instead of caution. She wasn't pretending. Which meant this wasn't new. Amara exhaled slowly. That was when it hit her. Not just that he was cheating, but that he had been building something, somewhere else, while maintaining her. Every "I miss you" wasn't meant to keep her close. It was meant to keep her quiet. Marcus took Chloe's suitcase and rolled it beside him as they walked. His hand brushed hers once, then again, not by accident. They didn't look around. They didn't hesitate. They moved like two people who had already decided where they stood with each other. And Amara, standing just behind them, realized something else. He wasn't afraid of getting caught. Because in his mind, she wasn't even a possibility in that moment. That realization didn't break her. It focused her. Her grip on the suitcase loosened. Her shoulders relaxed. Her breathing steadied, as if her body had chosen clarity over chaos. She wasn't heartbroken. She was aware. Marcus opened the passenger door for Chloe. She stepped in, smiling up at him as if he had just done something special, something meaningful. He closed the door gently, walked around the car, and got in without once looking back. The engine started. The car pulled away. And just like that, the version of her life she had been living ended. Amara stood there for a few seconds longer, her reflection faintly visible in the glass doors of the terminal. She looked the same posture, same face. But internally, something had shut off. Not emotion, trust. She turned toward the taxi line. Each step was calm, deliberate, controlled. Because somewhere in the space between that phone call and this moment, she had already made a decision. She just hadn't fully realized it yet. The house felt different when she walked in. Not messy, not obviously wrong, but altered. Amara closed the door behind her and paused, letting the silence settle. The faint scent in the air caught her attention first. Something floral, slightly sweet, unfamiliar. Not hers. Not something Marcus would ever choose. She walked into the kitchen. There it was, a mug, white, small pink flower printed on the side. Clean, placed neatly near the sink like it belonged there. It didn't. Amara didn't touch it immediately. She just looked at it, then turned away. Upstairs, the bedroom was exactly how she left it. The bed made, the surfaces clear, everything in place. Two in place. In the bathroom, she found it. A travel-sized conditioner bottle, half-used, different brand, placed casually like it didn't need to be hidden. Amara picked it up, turned it slowly in her hand, and for a moment, she almost smiled. Not out of humor, out of recognition. This wasn't sloppy. This was comfortable, which meant one thing. She wasn't the only one who had been here, and she wasn't new. Amara set the bottle down carefully, walked back downstairs, poured herself a cup of tea, sat at the table, and finally allowed herself to think. Not react. Think. Her mind moved quickly, methodically, the way it always had when something needed to be solved. She replayed the past few months, not emotionally, but structurally. The late replies, the canceled plans, the small shifts she had dismissed. They weren't random. They were patterns, and patterns could be traced. That's when she reached for her phone, not to call him, but to open something else. The joint account. Her eyes scanned the transactions, then slowed, then stopped. Small transfers, regular, unfamiliar destinations, not large enough to alarm, but consistent enough to matter. Her thumb scrolled further, more. Dates lining up with his late nights, with his meetings. Amara leaned back in her chair, and for the first time since the airport, she felt something close to satisfaction. Because now, it wasn't just a feeling, it was evidence. She didn't cry, didn't confront him, didn't even text, because she understood something Marcus didn't. Emotion reacts, but strategy waits. She closed the app, took a slow sip of her tea, and stared at the mug with the pink flower, then quietly moved it to the center of the table, as if placing it exactly where it belonged, in plain sight. And somewhere across the city, Marcus was still smiling, completely unaware that the woman he thought he had deceived had already started building the case that would destroy him. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. Because in that moment, she didn't need emotions. She needed proof. Amara sat in the dim kitchen light, the untouched mug with the pink flower still placed in the center of the table like a piece of evidence already admitted into court. The house was quiet, but not peaceful. It was the kind of silence that revealed things instead of hiding them. Her reflection stared back at her faintly from the window, composed, unreadable, almost detached from the version of herself that had walked into the airport hours ago, expecting love. She reached for her laptop, not impulsively, not angrily, precisely. Amara had always been the kind of woman who solved problems in layers. Growing up in a household where unpredictability was constant, she had learned early that emotions didn't fix anything. Patterns did. Systems did. Information did. That discipline had followed her into adulthood, into her career, into her marriage, and now, into this. She opened a new folder, labeled it simply Records. No drama, no assumptions, just facts. The first thing she did was map time. Her fingers moved steadily across the keyboard, pulling together dates, her travel schedule, Marcus's late meetings, the nights he had sounded distracted, the calls that felt slightly too short. She wasn't guessing anymore. She was aligning data. And the more she aligned it, the more it fit. Her phone buzzed. Marcus. She looked at the screen, let it ring, watched his name disappear. He called again, and again. Amara turned the phone face down, not out of fear, out of control. Because now, every move mattered. The next morning, she left the house early, not to escape, to observe. The city moved as it always did, cars flowing, people rushing, routines repeating themselves without question. Amara blended into it easily, dressed in a structured navy coat that framed her tall figure, her hair still pulled back, her face calm but focused. No one looking at her would think anything had changed. But everything had. She parked 2 blocks away from Marcus's office, waited. Time passed slowly, but her patience didn't crack. She had spent years building a life that required consistency. Waiting was not uncomfortable for her. At 8:47 a.m., Marcus arrived. He stepped out of his car with the same relaxed confidence, adjusting his jacket, glancing briefly at his phone before heading toward the building. He looked exactly like the man everyone trusted. That was the third truth. Marcus wasn't sloppy. He was practiced. Amara didn't follow him. She didn't need to, because she wasn't chasing him. She was studying him. That afternoon, she met someone new, Tasha Williams. Tasha was a Black woman in her late 30s, slightly shorter than Amara but built with quiet strength, her shoulders squared and her posture firm, like someone who had learned to stand her ground early in life. Her skin carried a warm undertone, her hair styled in neat, shoulder-length braids pulled back from her face, revealing sharp eyes that missed nothing. She dressed simply, Dark blazer, clean lines, but there was something unmistakable about her presence. Control. Not loud, but absolute. Tasha had spent over a decade working in financial investigations, specializing in fraud and asset tracing. She had seen patterns of deception in every form: corporate, personal, calculated, careless. And what defined her wasn't just her ability to find the truth. It was her ability to wait until the truth mattered most. Amara sat across from her in a quiet cafe, sunlight cutting across the table between them. "I don't want assumptions," Amara said calmly. "I want facts." Tasha studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Good," she said, "because assumptions are what people use when they're about to lose." There was no sympathy in her tone, only alignment. Amara slid her phone across the table, the transaction records already pulled up. Tasha glanced at them, then again, slower. "Small amounts," she said. "Consistent timing." She leaned back slightly. "He's not hiding it from the system," she added. "He's hiding it from you." Amara didn't react, because she already knew. "What does that mean?" she asked. Tasha's eyes sharpened. "It means he thinks you won't look closely enough." A pause. "And that's his first mistake." By evening, Amara was back home. The house hadn't changed, but she had. She walked into the kitchen, her eyes landing immediately on the mug again. It was still there, exactly where she had placed it, a quiet reminder of the line that had already been crossed. Her phone buzzed again. Marcus. This time, she answered. "Hey," he said, his voice softer now, careful. "You got home okay?" Amara leaned lightly against the counter, her expression neutral. "Yeah," she replied. A pause. "You sounded tired last night," he continued. "Long flight?" Amara's gaze drifted toward the mug. "Something like that." Marcus exhaled lightly, relieved by the normalcy. "I'll be home late tonight," he said. "Just meetings." Amara closed her eyes briefly, not out of pain, out of confirmation. "Okay," she said. She hung up. And for the first time since the airport, she allowed herself a small, controlled smile. Because now she understood something completely. Marcus wasn't just lying. He was repeating a script, and scripts could be predicted. She walked over to the table, picked up the pink-flowered mug, and turned it slightly so the design faced outward, perfectly visible. Then she placed it back down, exactly in the center, not hidden, not moved, displayed, like a marker, a signal, a line drawn without words. And somewhere across the city, Marcus continued his day, completely unaware that the woman he thought would react emotionally was already 3 steps ahead of him and just beginning to turn his lies into something far more dangerous. 6 months of lies, hidden in transactions no one thought she would ever read. Back home, nothing was loud, but everything was wrong. Amara stood in the living room, her eyes moving slowly across the space she once called stable, familiar, safe. The couch was exactly where it had always been, the cushions aligned, the surfaces clean. It looked like a home that was taken care of. But now she understood. It had never been taken care of. It had been maintained. By her. That realization didn't hurt. It clarified. She walked into the bedroom again, not searching, not digging, but observing with intention. The scent was still there, faint but persistent, floral, slightly sweet, layered over something warmer. It didn't belong to her routines, her preferences, her presence. It belonged to someone who felt comfortable enough to stay. Amara didn't touch anything. She didn't need to, because evidence didn't always announce itself. Sometimes it simply existed, waiting to be recognized. She returned to the kitchen, her laptop already open, the folder labeled Records glowing faintly on the screen. This was where things became real. Not emotional, not interpretive, provable. She logged into their shared account again, scrolled, slower this time. Her eyes moved with precision, catching what most people would overlook: timing, repetition, structure. Small transactions, always under a threshold that would trigger alerts. Payments routed through different descriptions, disguised as routine expenses. But the pattern was there. It always was. Late-night charges tied to specific dates that aligned with his meetings. Hotel bookings under third-party names. Transfers sent in intervals, never large but consistent. Amara leaned back in her chair. 6 months. That's how long it had been happening. Not a mistake, not a moment, a system. And systems were built intentionally. Her fingers tapped lightly against the table, her mind moving faster now, connecting timelines, mapping behavior, reconstructing decisions. Marcus hadn't just lied. He had structured his life to support the lie, and that meant something else. He believed it would hold. Her phone buzzed, a message this time. Marcus, thinking about you. Tonight might be late again. Amara stared at the screen. No anger, no reaction, just observation. Because now she could see it clearly. He wasn't even changing the script. He was repeating it. That made him predictable. And predictable people were easy to dismantle. She placed the phone down without replying. That evening she made another call, not to confront, to expand. Elliot Crane. Elliot was a white man in his early 40s, tall, lean, with sharp angular features and a permanent 5 o'clock shadow that gave him a slightly restless appearance. His hair, dark blonde and always slightly disheveled, framed a face that rarely showed full emotion, but his eyes, pale gray, calculating, missed nothing. He had spent years working in digital forensics, tracing financial anomalies and uncovering hidden behaviors through data patterns. Where Tasha understood structure, Elliot understood concealment. He answered on the second ring. Amara, he said, his voice low, neutral. It's been a while. I need clarity, she replied. A pause, then, almost amused. Of course you do. They met later that night in his office, a minimalist space filled with screens, each one reflecting streams of data, numbers, fragments of digital behavior most people would never notice. Elliot reviewed the information quickly, too quickly, which meant he already saw something. He's careful, Elliot said, leaning back slightly, but not careful enough. Amara remained still. Explain. Elliot tapped the screen, pulling up a sequence of transactions. These aren't random, he continued. They're disguised, yes, but they follow a rhythm. He zoomed in further. Same days of the week, same time windows, same routing behavior. He looked at her. He's not improvising. Another pause. He's maintaining 2 lives. Amara's expression didn't change, because that part she already knew. What else? She asked. Elliot's fingers moved again, opening another layer. Device usage, he said. Multiple login points, secondary communication apps. He glanced at her. He's compartmentalizing. A softer tone now. But here's the problem. Amara's eyes sharpened slightly. He thinks separation equals safety, Elliot said. Then, quietly, it doesn't. Back home, the house felt smaller, not physically, structurally, as if every hidden detail had reduced it to something simpler, something solvable. Amara walked back into the kitchen, her eyes landing on the mug again. Still there, still visible. She picked it up this time, turned it slowly in her hand, examined it not as an object, but as a signal. This wasn't just evidence, it was access. Proof that someone else had been allowed into her space, and more importantly, proof that Marcus believed he could control both worlds without collision. That belief would cost him everything. Amara placed the mug back down, opened her laptop, created a second folder. Timeline, then a third. Assets. Her movements were calm, measured, deliberate. Because now, she wasn't discovering anymore. She was building. Not a reaction, a case. Upstairs, the faint scent lingered again, but it didn't bother her now, because scent fades, patterns don't. She stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at the life she had built, maintained, protected, and now was about to dismantle. Not out of anger, out of truth. And somewhere across the city, Marcus continued moving between his two lives, confident in the distance he believed he had created, completely unaware that every step he took was now being tracked, mapped, and prepared for the moment it would all collapse. 2 weeks later, she sat across from him like nothing had ever happened. Marcus had no idea. This would be the last normal conversation of his life. The house was quiet that evening, wrapped in a calm that felt almost deliberate. The same kitchen, the same table, the same woman sitting across from him, but something fundamental had shifted, and he couldn't name it yet. Amara looked exactly as she always did, composed, poised, her posture straight, her movements controlled. Her deep brown skin caught the soft overhead light, her expression neutral, almost peaceful. But her eyes, steady, unreadable, held a stillness Marcus wasn't used to seeing. Not distance, not anger, something else. Control. Marcus leaned back slightly in his chair, loosening his tie, trying to settle into the familiar rhythm of their conversations. He was a man who thrived on familiarity, on patterns he could navigate. Raised in a household where conflict was often loud and chaotic, he had learned early to avoid confrontation by managing perception. Say the right thing, maintain the tone, keep everything smooth. It had worked for years, until now. "You've been quiet," he said, offering a small smile, the same one that had once made things easier between them. Amara didn't respond immediately. She simply looked at him. Not searching, not questioning, observing. Then she reached down calmly beside her chair and lifted a folder onto the table, placed it directly between them. Marcus's eyes dropped to it instinctively. Plain, black, structured, intentional. "What's that?" he asked lightly, though something in his chest tightened without permission. Amara rested her hands gently on the table, her fingers interlocked. "This," she said quietly, "is where we stop pretending." Marcus blinked once, a small pause. Then he leaned forward, opening the folder with casual curiosity that didn't quite reach his eyes. Inside, order. Pages arranged with precision. Bank records highlighted in clean lines. Receipts labeled by date and time. Screenshots printed and aligned. A timeline, clear, structured, undeniable. Marcus's hand stopped mid-page. His breathing shifted slightly. Not panic, not yet, but something close. "What is this?" he repeated, slower this time. Amara watched him carefully. "This," she said, her tone unchanged, "is 6 months of your life." Silence settled over the table. Marcus flipped another page, then another. Each movement slower than the last. He was a man used to controlling conversations, guiding outcomes, reframing reality. But this wasn't something he could redirect. "Amara," he started. She raised her hand slightly, not aggressive, not dramatic, final. "I'm not here to argue," she said. Her voice didn't rise, it didn't shake. "I'm here to end this." The words didn't land loudly, they landed clean. Marcus leaned back in his chair, exhaling through his nose, his mind moving quickly now, searching for angles, explanations, anything that could restore control. His jaw tightened slightly, the line of his beard sharpening as tension replaced ease. "It's not what you think," he said automatically. The sentence came out too fast, too familiar. Amara didn't react, because she had already moved past that stage. She leaned forward slightly, her gaze steady. "Then tell me what it is," she said. A pause. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it again, because for the first time, he didn't have a version of the truth that would work, not one that could survive what was sitting in front of him. He looked down at the folder again, the dates, the times, the consistency. There was no space left to maneuver. And that was when it happened, the shift. Subtle, but undeniable. The man who had always known what to say didn't. Amara saw it immediately, the hesitation, the fracture, the exact moment his confidence broke under the weight of reality. And in that moment, she understood something completely. Marcus had never expected to be seen this clearly. Not by her, not by anyone. He leaned back again, slower this time, his shoulders no longer relaxed, his posture no longer effortless. The room felt different now, smaller, tighter, as if the space itself had turned against him. "You went through my accounts?" he asked, his voice lower now, defensive, searching for ground. Amara tilted her head slightly. "Our accounts," she corrected. Another pause, longer this time. Marcus looked at her, really looked, and for the first time since she walked into that airport, he saw it. She wasn't reacting. She wasn't emotional. She wasn't trying to fix anything. She was finished. And that realization hit harder than anything else. Because he had built everything on one assumption, that she would stay, that she would argue, forgive, adjust, continue. But she wasn't doing any of that. She was ending it. Cleanly, completely. Marcus exhaled slowly, his hand resting on the edge of the table now, his fingers no longer steady. "What do you want?" he asked. Amara leaned back, her posture still composed, her expression unchanged. "Clarity," she said. A beat. "Legally." Marcus's jaw tightened again, because now, this wasn't just personal. This was structural, final, irreversible. Amara stood up slowly, the chair sliding back with a soft sound that echoed louder than it should have in the silence. She picked up the folder, then paused for just a moment, looking down at him. "I gave you time you didn't deserve," she said calmly. Another beat. "I'm not giving you anything else." Then she turned and walked away. Marcus didn't follow, didn't speak, didn't stop her. Because for the first time in his life, he didn't know how. And as the door closed behind her, Marcus sat alone at the table, staring at the space where control used to be, finally realizing the woman he thought he could manage had just become the one thing in his life he could never control again. The new girl moved in, and 3 weeks later, everything started breaking. At first, it didn't look like a collapse. It looked like a minor inconvenience, something small, forgettable, easy to fix. The internet cut out on a Monday morning, right when Marcus needed it most. He stood in the kitchen, phone pressed to his ear, frustration tightening his voice as he waded through automated prompts. Across the room, Chloe leaned against the counter, arms folded, watching him with quiet curiosity. Chloe had settled into the house quickly. She was the kind of woman who adapted to spaces without asking too many questions, filling silence with presence instead of understanding. Her long, straight hair now fell loosely over her shoulders in the mornings, slightly messy but intentional, her style still polished even in the unfamiliar environment. She had brought her own things, clothes, makeup, a few decorative pieces, but none of them quite fit the structure of the house, because the house wasn't designed randomly. It had been built by Amara. "Did you forget to pay it?" Chloe asked, her tone light but edged with something sharper underneath. Marcus exhaled, running a hand along his jaw, the neat line of his beard now slightly unkempt compared to how Amara used to insist he maintain it. "No," he said quickly. "It's probably just a system error." But it wasn't. The payment hadn't processed, because the account had always been under Amara's name, and when she left, it stopped. The next issue came 2 days later, the insurance notice. Marcus found it buried under a stack of unopened mail, the envelope already marked with a second warning stamp. He opened it casually at first, then again, slower. His eyes moved across the page, trying to make sense of something he had never needed to think about before. Coverage lapse, reactivation required, higher premium. He stared at the numbers, then at the date. It had already expired. "Is that serious?" Chloe asked, stepping closer now, her voice quieter, more cautious. Marcus hesitated, because he didn't know, and that was new. "Not really," he said anyway, but his tone lacked the confidence it used to carry. By the second week, the problems stopped being isolated. They became a pattern. The water softener stopped cycling properly. The scheduled maintenance for the boiler was missed. A notice appeared from the neighborhood association about parking violations. Each issue small, manageable. But together, they formed something heavier, something constant, something that didn't go away. Chloe began to notice the shift before Marcus admitted it. She moved through the house differently now, slower, less certain, her earlier confidence replaced by quiet observation. She watched him more closely, how he handled things, how he reacted under pressure, how often he didn't have answers. Because the version of Marcus she had believed in, the stable one, the reliable one, was starting to disappear, and in its place was something unfinished. On the third week, it reached its breaking point. Chloe stood in the kitchen early that morning, holding a letter in her hand, her expression unreadable. The sunlight caught her face, but there was no warmth in it now. "What is this?" she asked. Marcus looked up from his phone. "What?" She placed the paper on the table. "Final notice," she said. "They're cutting off another service if this isn't resolved." Marcus frowned, picking it up, scanning it quickly, his jaw tightening again. "I'll fix it," he said. But this time, Chloe didn't respond. She just watched him, longer than usual, carefully, as if seeing him for the first time. Chloe wasn't naive. She had grown up watching her mother manage everything, bills, schedules, responsibilities, while her father moved through life without understanding how much was being done for him. It had made her independent, sharp, observant, and now she was seeing the same pattern, just from the other side. "You told me your life was stressful," she said slowly. Marcus didn't answer. "You said the house felt like pressure," she continued. Still nothing. Chloe stepped closer. But this isn't pressure, she said quietly. She looked around the room. This is maintenance. Marcus exhaled sharply, frustration rising now. I said I'll fix it. Chloe nodded once, not agreeing, understanding. And that was worse. That evening she packed a bag. Not everything, just enough. Marcus stood in the doorway watching her, confusion mixing with something close to panic. What are you doing? He asked. Chloe zipped the bag slowly, then looked at him. Really looked at him. And for the first time, there was no admiration in her expression, only clarity. I didn't choose you, she said. A pause. I chose the life she built. The words landed harder than anything Amara had said, because they weren't emotional. They were accurate. Chloe picked up her bag and walked past him. No argument, no hesitation, just exit. The house went quiet again, but this time, it wasn't temporary. Marcus stood alone in the kitchen, the same space that had once felt effortless, now filled with unfinished details, unresolved problems, and a silence that didn't comfort him. The internet was still unstable, the bills still stacked, the systems still failing. And for the first time, he saw it. Not as inconvenience, but as absence. Amara had never been loud, never demanding, never obvious. But everything that worked had worked because of her. And now, nothing did. Marcus sat down slowly, his hand resting on the table, his fingers tracing the surface where the pink-flowered mug had once been placed. He remembered it now. He just hadn't understood it then. And as the silence settled around him, Marcus finally realized he hadn't just lost a woman. He had lost the structure that made his life function, and he had no idea how to rebuild it. He thought he lost a woman, but what he really lost was the system that made him look like a man. Marcus didn't understand that immediately. At first, it felt like inconvenience, then pressure, then something heavier, something that didn't have a clear name but stayed with him from morning to night. The house didn't just feel empty now. It felt unfinished, like a structure that had been quietly supported from within and then suddenly abandoned. He stood in the kitchen again, staring at a stack of unpaid bills, the edges slightly curled from being handled too often. His reflection in the dark window looked different, less composed. The sharpness of his jaw softened by tension, his beard no longer trimmed with the precision Amara used to remind him of. His shoulders, once relaxed, now carried a stiffness that came from constant low-level stress. Marcus had always believed he was managing his life. Now, he realized, he had been moving inside something that was already managed, and without it, he didn't know where to start. Across the city, Amara's life didn't collapse. It recalibrated. Her new apartment sat on the second floor of a quiet building, the kind that didn't try to impress anyone. The space was smaller than the house she had left behind, but it felt intentional. Clean lines, open light, no excess, just what was necessary and nothing that wasn't. She stood by the window early one morning, a cup of tea in her hand, watching the street come to life below. People moved with purpose. Cars passed in steady rhythm. It was ordinary, and that was exactly what she wanted. Freedom didn't feel loud to her. It felt clear. That morning she met someone new, Dr. Evelyn Carter. Evelyn was a Black woman in her mid-40s, tall and composed, with smooth, dark skin and a presence that commanded attention without effort. Her hair was cut short, natural, framing a face defined by sharp lines and steady intelligence. She dressed simply, neutral tones, structured fabrics, but everything about her suggested discipline, precision, and control. Years of working as a behavioral psychologist had shaped her into someone who understood not just what people did, but why they did it. She had built her career studying patterns of emotional dependency, identity construction, and relational dynamics. More importantly, she had learned how to break them. Amara sat across from her in a quiet office, sunlight falling softly across the polished desk between them. "You're not angry," Evelyn observed. Amara didn't hesitate. "No," she said. Evelyn tilted her head slightly, studying her. "That's unusual," she added. Amara's gaze remained steady. "I don't need anger," she replied. "I need accuracy." A small pause. Evelyn leaned back slightly, a subtle shift in posture that signaled recognition. "Good," she said, "because anger reacts. Accuracy rewrites." Over the next few weeks, Amara didn't rebuild her life emotionally. She rebuilt it structurally. Her days followed a rhythm, intentional, controlled, deliberate. She returned to projects she had set aside, reconnected with professional networks, reorganized her finances, refined her priorities. Nothing dramatic, nothing performative, just consistent forward movement. Because unlike Marcus, she had never depended on someone else to hold her life together. Marcus, on the other hand, was learning something much slower and much harder. He sat in his living room one evening, the lights dim, the silence pressing in around him in a way that felt heavier than noise ever could. The house wasn't broken, but it wasn't functioning, and the difference mattered. He thought about Chloe's words. "I didn't choose you. I chose the life she built." At the time, they felt sharp. Now, they felt accurate. Marcus leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, his hands clasped loosely together. He had spent most of his life believing he was adaptable, that he could move through situations, adjust, recover. But this wasn't a situation. It was a structure, and he had never learned how to build one. Days passed, then weeks. The problems didn't disappear. They accumulated. Each small task, each responsibility, each decision he once ignored now demanded his attention. And with every failure, every delay, every missed detail, something inside him shifted. Not dramatically, quietly. A realization forming slowly, the way truth often does when there's no one left to distract you from it. He hadn't been in control. He had been supported, and he hadn't even noticed. Amara stood on her balcony one evening, the air cool against her skin, her posture relaxed in a way it hadn't been in years. The city stretched out in front of her, steady, alive, unconcerned with anything she had left behind. She thought about the airport, the moment everything changed, the moment she thought she lost something, and she understood it differently now. She didn't lose anything. She stopped carrying it. Everything she had built, everything she had maintained, everything she had quietly held together was never meant to be invisible. It was never meant to be unrecognized. And once she saw that clearly, she no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. Somewhere across the city, Marcus sat in a house that no longer worked, still trying to understand what had been holding it together, while the woman he thought he lost was already living a life that had never needed him to function. Sometimes, the strongest people aren't the loudest. They're the ones holding everything together in silence. And the truth is, people don't realize your value when you're doing everything right. They realize it when you stop. He didn't lose her because she wasn't enough. He lost her because he never understood what she was carrying. So remember this: if you're the one holding everything together, make sure you're not the only one doing it. Have you ever been the system in someone else's life until you finally stopped? Tell your story below.